Okay, so hello everyone. As most of you know, I am doing a full series on clothing making through, from Marvelous Designer through all the different dev kits that there are for Second Life, for as many that I can get. And we've gone over most of the basics of everything, and I think it's time that we go ahead and work on texture baking. Plus, I've had a few requests for this kind of tutorial, so I hope you guys are happy. Here it is. Um, a few things up front is that I'm using version 2.83. It is the latest stable release as of today, which is April 10th, 2021. The other thing is that because I'm doing clothing, I've finished almost all of it. I stop when it comes to the solidify. You do not want solidify on your clothes when you're texture baking because it gets in the way. So if two pieces of clothing are really close together, you're going to get nothing but black texture. So where you might want the dark under the arms and a crease around the belt, inside of folds, that's great. But if you do the inside of a skirt, the whole skirt is going to be black. And you're going to be like, what the heck happened to my texture baking? And I'm going to say, did you have your solidify on? So no solidify, anybody. The other thing that I want to show you is how to make this easy. One of the pain in the butts about doing your cycles is setting up your blender perfectly for it. So I came up with this kind of like a layout here inside a blender, and I save it as my basic cycles file. So whenever I have a cycles project to do, I just open that up and my scene is all set up and ready to go. So I'm going to show you mine. The other thing is that when I bring in the dress to do, I'm going to bring in the actual dress from the other Blender file. I'm not going to export it and then import it into this one. The reason is if you are anything like me, I have exported that dress 10 times and I've made a mistake. The weights weren't right. Maybe I exported everything instead of only selected. You can run into 1,000 different reasons why that export didn't work, and now you have them all sitting there in your folder and you don't know which one to bring in. So when the dress is absolutely totally ready to actually be um, uh, made textures for, we're going to bring it in from that actual file. So what you want to do when you're in there, in your first file, making your dress or your clothing, is you want to name everything. So an easy way to name it here inside of Blender is to have it be the only thing selected, right click, and choose Rename Active Object. So active object means if I had 4 things selected, the last one selected is the active object, and that's the one that would get renamed. So we would name this, let's say, our top, right? Now, when I append it from into another Blender file, I'll know which piece is which. Otherwise, you will have objects and planes and cylinders all over the place. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, and forgive me for talking so fast, I got to learn to slow down a little bit. Just chill out. Okay, so I'm going to go to the timeline here, which most of us have by default. If you don't, create a new window and make that new window a a shader editor. And this is where our nodes are going to sit. This is where we're going to play around with all the settings and have fun with our textures. The next thing you want to do is follow my mouse here up to the upper right corner until you get crosshairs. Left click and pull it to the side. So this window is going to be our working window. This is where we're going to have our actual mesh where we're going to work on it. Let's go back up here to the right and pull again with our left mouse button. And now the center one is going to be our render window. This is where we're going to see the effects of all the material things that we do, the textures, the lighting, the colors, patterns, all that stuff. We're going to see it in this window, but in order to see it, we have to come up here to these 4 buttons. You see them? Right now, this one is selected. That just means solid shading. The very last one is render shading. So we're going to click on that, and now it's gray. And this is where we will see our clothing with all of its effects on it. The last window is going to be our UV editor. So come up to the editor type button and choose UV editor. There we go. A little quick tip for everybody. When you're working with a file like this, and let's say you've got clothing done in it, textures done in it, sometimes when you reopen that file, your scene will look like this, and you'll be like, why can't I see my unwrapping? Why can't I see this or that in this window? Because sometimes when you reopen it, it actually changes to an image editor. And so if you see this icon, you know that it's switched on you, and all you have to do is go back and switch it to the UV editor. And that's done. The last step is to actually come into our panel over here, and we're going to go into our scene button or tab, and where it says render engine and it has EV by default, we want to change that to cycles. EV is good for renders, but it doesn't do baked textures, so we need cycles for that. It's at this point that you could go ahead and save this file as your basic cycles file. And now when you want to do a cycles project, all you have to do is open up this file. Say you're going to do a dress. After you open it up, click File and Save As and name it your dress. Cycles, you know, like baby doll dress, cycles blend or something like that. And it's always good to save this file because somebody might come to you and you might want they might want a texture or they want something custom done. You have it all saved and all ready to go. And all you have to do is bake out a new texture for it with the adjustments on it and then file save again. Alright, so I am going to start with bringing in the mesh object. So I'm going to go to File and Append. Append brings it directly from the other Blender file. So Append, and let me go up here because I am in the wrong folder. Okay, so baby dress tutorial. These are my different blend files that I've been playing with. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this one, and it brings up all these folders. These folders are all the things that that blend file holds. You'll see we have object, and we got a plane in here, a camera, and we've got the dress. So let's go ahead and select the dress. And you can see it's all gray because it's got absolutely no materials and no textures on it. Over here is just a regular mesh item. We want to get this window set up. This is one of those little tedious parts. So we're going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add a camera because we need to have a camera in there. But if you look at it, it's all goofy and not lined up right at all. So if yours is like that, open up the little properties panel here, go to item, and I just happen to know that my X rotation should be 90, and I know that my Y should be 0, and my Z should be 0, and now you know it too. So I'm going to go into side view, I'm going to grab this and move it. And now when I hit 0 on my number pad, it shows you what my camera sees. Now you're thinking that's awful far back. It's really not. Because if I come in here and I start working on my dress, I don't want this camera in the way, either visually or I don't want to be clicking on it and selecting it when I want to be selecting my dress. So I do like to have this whoops, wrong button, GY. I do like to have that back and out of the way. The next thing we need to think about is lights. So for the lights, you can add some of the standard lights in there. Shift A. You can add in some of these lights. But what I like to do is going to sound strange. I like to put planes in there. So Shift A, Mesh, Plane. Oh, so let me delete that. Let me put my cursor, see how my cursor's over there? Let me put my cursor back in the center with Shift and C. Again, Shift A to pull up your mesh plane. Let's scale that down a little bit. We're going to look at it from the side and hit R to rotate it, and then G just to move it back. I'm going to hit Shift. Well, actually, let's go in the top view, and you can see a little bit better what I'm trying to do with my lights. So I'm going to hit Shift plus D to make a duplicate. I'm going to hit R to rotate it, maybe about there. G to move it, and move it over here. We could even move this one a little bit closer, I think. Shift and D again. You can see I got it. Right click to drop it in place. R to rotate it. And then G to move it where I want it. So I have like a triangle of the actual lights surrounding it. I don't want lights on every side of it because you get absolutely no shadows that way. I am using my left mouse button to select all three of these, using Control plus J in order to join them. They are now one object. For the next part that I'm doing, I'd like to have my origin centered. So origin, set origin, or object, set origin to geometry. And I'm going to turn on my gizmo for remove. There we go. And now you can see it. So I'm just going to pull this straight up. Now while I'm going to be using these lights, there is a nice fun trick that you can do if you have a second set of lights. So I'm going to do Shift D to duplicate that. I'm going to rotate it by 180 degrees. So R 180, enter. And I'm just moving those straight down. I'm not using these yet. I just want them there and ready for when I do want to use them. Later on, if I want to use these lights or these kind of lights, I could just duplicate the set that I've made, but these ones will have settings in it. And so I want these ones now with no settings in it. Alright, now let's go back to our dress. We're ready. We are just about ready because I just saw I have materials on here from before. So let me go ahead and get rid of all those materials. I might have another set. I'll check in a second. So putting it in edit mode. No materials there. Alright. So the first thing that I want to do is you can see that when I hit L, it selects the whole dress. I want to actually have, does this have solidify on it? No, it doesn't. But it has extra mesh somewhere. Let me go ahead and there's extra mesh here that I don't really want on here. So let me go ahead and just delete the vertices on those. And I think I have one extra one on the bottom. And let me delete those. Don't worry about what I'm doing now. I'm just cleaning it up. Okay, so I want to have the top and the bottom as separate faces. I want to be able to bake a texture for each one of them individually. And the reason for that is options. It just expands your choices of how you want to make this later on. So I'm going to take this very center edge loop and select it. I'm going to use the letter V, my shortcut key for ripping this apart. So V, and now you can see it's been ripped apart. And I'm going to right mouse click to drop it back where it came from. So it's separated, but you can't really tell because now the edge for the top of this one and for the bottom of this one are in the exact same place. You can be sure that I've separated them when I do L on this one, only the bottom is selected. And when I do L on this one, the top is only selected. Okay? So this is ideally the way that it would have come into my Blender file. Not with those few extra rows on here where I started to create the sides and the bottom edges of it rather than solidify. Anyhow, I digress. Alright, with the top selected here, you'll see it in the UV editor, and you hit A for all. I want you to come over to your Materials tab, click New Material, name it Top. Oh, I did my capital letters backwards on that one. Let's do no capital letters. And let's hit Assign. What you're going to notice is that we've got this Principled BSDF node in here. We do not want this one. You will also notice that it immediately put that same node down here, and it put a material output node as well. I do not want this one. I want to go ahead and use a mix shader. The reason for this is the Principled one is really good. It's got a lot of advantages to it, but doing it the way I'm going to show you today is easy. It's easy to remember, it's easy to figure out, it's fun to play with, and you get great results anyways. The clothes that you see now and all the texture baking that you see now that was done in Blender on Second Life has been done using it this way. So, yeah, this is good. After you see that these have come into this window, let's go back over here for a second. So when you have a mix shader, it takes two separate shaders and mixes them together. It lets them work together. So which two do we want to work together? Well, for our purposes today, let's go ahead and use Diffuse BSDF. So that's right there. And for the second shader, don't get lost in these new settings that opened up. Just go to the next shader and let's choose Glossy. And now you can see that our Glossy shader, is right there. Perfect. Now, there's a few other things that we need to do. We need to go to Add. We need to go to Output and choose Material Output. We could have, if we wanted to, just copied this one with Shift D and put it over there, but I wanted you to see where it comes from. This comes from the output. The next one that we need is for a texture. So let's go to the Textures tab and let's choose Image Texture. And this, you'll see that they become, when you pick them, they're kind of stuck to your mouse. So you just move this over here. For this one, you do need to take the color noodle and add it to the surface input right there. Immediately you see a little something happen. What we need to do next is to enable materials to have textures in them. This is all about colors and effects, but if we go to Add and we add another texture, Image Texture node, if we go to Add and go to Vector and choose Mapping, we can put that there. If we go to Add and we choose input, we can choose texture coordinates. Alright, so let me just open this up a little bit. Whoops. There we go. And I can explain these parts now. So texture coordinates says to you, how do you want Blender to read where to lay down your textures? How do we know where you want your colors and your patterns and things like that? Because you're not coloring in the whole space. You want to color where you have UVs. So if we do this, you want it to color where the UVs are. So for us, our texture coordinates are going to be UV. So take the UV node and plug it into the vector spot there. These three settings are just like the texture settings that you see inside of Second Life. Location is the offset. You know how you have that horizontal and vertical offset at the bottom of your texture settings? That's what this is. Rotation is just what it says. It can rotate your texture. And scale is these are like the repeats. So you can, make it a bigger scale or a smaller scale, making that texture bigger or smaller. And you do have to take this and you have to plug it into the image texture node. Now the image texture node has a library on it. And in this library, you'll see I've got one picture already right there, right? Unicorns. But in this one, you can open up your browser. And let me go ahead and see if I can find that folder. I can never find my folders very easily. There's always something going on in them. Okay, so I'm going to choose a couple of textures there. You can choose them all if you want. And I'm going to hit Open Image. And now all of those textures I just selected are in here. So that's why I call this like the library button. You can come in here and choose any of these on the fly. So if we're playing with one texture, you're like, I don't know if I like that. Maybe let's try the checkers or the plaid. You can come down and just click on the plaid, and then you're working with that one. Okay, so that's that part. Let me move these over here. You really do want to have all of these, close to each other while you're working. And now let me just pull that down a little bit. Alright, so that is the top setup so far. Let's go ahead and do the bottom. So select that one. I was just looking at something, sorry. We have the UV selected. So we're going to make a new slot. So click on the plus button. Hit new. We'll call this skirt. And hit enter. And let's hit assign. The same thing happens. We have a principal shader that we don't need, so come here and let's change it to mix. Again, we're going to choose diffuse as the top shader, and we're going to choose glossy as the bottom. This time we will go ahead and click on material output, hit shift plus D, and move it to the side. Let's go to add, texture, image texture, bring it here, shift D, and move it there. Add, input, texture coordinates, add, vector, mapping, and put that there. You will notice that even though this is a new image texture node, it does have our ones in there from working with it. It is a library. It holds all images from all different areas. Again, we're putting the UV into our vector. We're putting our vector into our vector. So we're going to do this here. And we do want to connect our color to our surface for that. Okay, let's go ahead and go into object mode. Now we do need to click on our light. We need to make a new material for it, so let's call it light. And instead of principled, we want emission. There it is. Those are in alphabetical order, and I still go past it every time. Alright, there we go. One last thing, let's go on our... Now, because this is one piece, it's got two separate faces and two unwrappings, but it's still one object. So we have to go into the... Oh my goodness, my tongue just got totally tied up. We do have to come in here to our material tab, and let's say we want to work on our top, so we have to select top, and the top settings will come up. If we want to work on skirt, our skirt settings will come up. First though, we have to go into edit mode. The skirt is here. We need the skirt selected in this window, and we need to come up to creating a new image. So I'm going to hit create new image, and this is for the skirt, so I'm going to name it skirt exactly like I named it for the materials, and hit OK. Then I'm going to go up here and hit top. Well, I don't really have to do that yet, but let's go ahead and hit L there. Now we've got the top selected, so let's do new image. Let's type top and hit OK. Alright, now we're set to do our last step here. When it comes to texture baking, the information that's baked out has to go somewhere. And so this texture node and this material output node, this is what holds that information. And you want it to be set onto the tab, or set onto the texture that we just made, the black texture. So because we have the top selected, we have to come in here and choose the top. Okay? And that should be it. And we're going to click on that for now. Whenever you bake anything, this node has to be selected. If this is not selected, you're going to get errors, you're going to get these loop things. You're not going to get what you want. So this has to be selected. Let's go to skirt, open it, and let's choose the, let me see what I named it here. Probably skirt 1. Let me check one more thing. I don't know if it turned to skirt 1 or not, but let me get rid of that one. And select all, that's the top, so let's go here. And let's choose skirt. There we go. So now on here, we can choose skirt. Perfect. And we have our lights on, so that's good. Alright, so let me close this up, and now is the time to actually start playing with this. Okay, so if everybody's ready to see this part now, this is where it's fun. The first thing that you can do is use your lights. So if we go over here and click on the lights, and you can watch in here. Something I didn't tell you is if you go into the scene tab, you have a 128 render and viewport 32. This is how many steps Blender is going to take, or the sample size, to give you a look at what you're actually going to get. We want to see this in high resolution all the time, but it takes a long time to see that. So at the beginning, when you're just figuring out your textures, when you're figuring out the colors and the pattern and everything of your textures that you bring in, keep this relatively low, because as you change things, this render will start all over again. And you don't want to have to actually wait, 500 samples to be done into this so that you get a smooth, finished looking texture and then think, oh, that's not what I want. Let me do it all over again. So keep this low at first. And that, again, is the sampling in the scene tab. But as far as the color goes, it's kind of fun because you can click on the lights and you can increase their strength. You see how it's kind of dull right now? You can increase the strength to say maybe 10, and now you can see how much brighter it is. You can also add colors, so let's add, excuse me, I burped, like a peachy color. So that's kind of cool too. The thing about the other set of lights now is if I had a material on them, I could set those to say purple. And purple color would bleed up from the bottom while the peach is bleeding down from the top, and it would almost be like a gradient effect between those two colors. And of course, the stronger that you have each of them and the distance that they are from the actual dress in the 3D area here will affect the way that they look. So this is how you wonder like how they do the same outfit in 10 different colors. This is how they do that. If you Let's do this one real quick. Let me just so I can show you. I was going to save it for later, but let's change the principle to emission. We'll take its strength up to 10, and we'll change its color to a purple color. And now let's pull this up here. And now you can see where the purple and the peach, do you see? It only took 32 samples to get it right there, to get it this effect. And when we do things, we usually want a lot more samples. But see, as soon as you move it, the samples start over again. So if you have 500 samples and you want to see how it's really going to look, you have to wait a long time before. Don't move it because the count will start all over again. And the same thing here. When I pick this up, it starts all over again. And so to get a true look at the end, we have to kind of wait. If you have 500, you don't want to move anything. Okay, so let's move this out of the way. I'm going to take its color back down to white. I'm going to take its strength down to 0.0, just so it's not affecting anything right now. Let's go back up to the top one, and we're going to change its color back to white as well, but we'll leave the strength of it at 10. And now we might want a bit more shading. That's not too bad. You see the darker colors? We have it a little bit more, but if we increase the strength a little bit, then we get a little bit more of a contrast between the highlights and the shadowed areas. So you really just want to play with this. And let's turn it around. Again, what ends up happening is the sampling starts all over again. Okay, so I think that's pretty nice as far as that goes. You can actually now come into scene settings, bake, and you would come here and you would choose ambient occlusion, and then hit bake, and then an ambient occlusion map will come out for each one of these. Before I do that though, I want to actually keep playing with my things a bit. So I'm going to come into the materials tab and choose my dress there. Let's choose the skirt. Alright, so the skirt. The settings that I do on this one will not affect the top. It'll be the skirt only. So let's start with a nice bold color, red. The light that is on there is making it seem kind of shiny, but also so is the gloss from the glossy. So we can take the strength here and lower it so that the gloss isn't so glossy. Actually, it might be more glossy. Let's go the other way. Let's try this one real first. Just take the roughness up. And you just want to play with these. Do you see right there? That's like pure gloss. And that's from these up here. So let's take the strength down a little bit. You can actually bring this down as well. And now you can really see how it works. Okay, so let's take this all the way down to 0. Let's take this one all the way up to 1. And let's take our factor down to 0 here. So what you have here is a very flat color. You don't have a lot of gloss to it at all. This shader is the first part of the factor. This shader is the last part of the factor. So this is roughness, is set down to 0. So we take it and we bring it up a little bit. Take this one, bring it down a little bit. You can see how the gloss, the roughness coming down is adding more of a gloss. This is like what they do for like leather and stuff like that. I'm going to take this back to 0.5. I'm going to take this one to 0.5 as well, and this one 0.5. We're going to take the lamp and we're going to move it up out of the way. We don't need it to be so darn bright in there. You could even take the lamp for this and make it red as well, and that will help with the red color. All depends on what you want. Okay, so now if we go here and let's change, that is white. Let's go to the, whoops, skirt in this window. Let's change this back to white. And let's look at our actual textures that we want to put on it. So it's already in there, as you can see. This one right here, it's already in there. But the reason that it's not coming up on the mesh is because we don't have it plugged into anything. So you'll see that this is considered color. Diffuse is a pattern or a color. So we're going to plug it into this node here. There we go. That's not the one I was thinking though. Where's the one? This one. The one with the plaid on it. So when you use a texture, you can't really use the color from here. You can use color on the gloss, which you normally don't want unless you have some really wild ideas about your textures. And you could come here and you could add a little bit, let's say a little bit of a light purple to it, but it's really not a good effect. It all depends on what you're playing with and what you want. But this is how you get a texture on there. So we're going to come back in here, and these are the settings. So this one, like I said, this is an offset. You can see it's moving the texture to the side. This one here is an offset as well. So this one is moving the texture down. Here is the scale. This will make the pattern fuller in one direction and in the other direction. You can see how that's starting to change a bit. Let me go something crazy though so you can really see the effects of it. You see how tight that texture is now? Now it's like teeny tiny plaid. So that's what this is for. If you have a place or a texture that seems to fit odd, you want to get that kind of meeting where it is on the actual side. And it is here, so that's good. It's on the side. You could also try, I don't know which one it would be with this texture, but you could try rotating it a little. There, now it's rotated enough to where it gives us actually a cute pattern there. And the other side, as you can see, is completely clear. Let me see here. The way this thing keeps resampling, it's kind of, I think that might be on the bend. No, that looks okay. That's two different, see that? That's two different parts of the dress that are sticking out. That's like this one and this one, or this one and that one. So it's okay. But that's how you do a pattern. So now we can go to the top and we can get an image. Let's say we do this color. Again, we have to plug it into the diffuse, and you'll notice that that color par goes away. Alright, there's that. Let's increase this so that we can see a big difference on it as well. It looks a little grungy, doesn't it? I don't know if it's a very good texture for a little girl's dress. We could go back and we could try to put in, so we could use the other texture. Like I said, you could just change it on the fly. So if you bring in a bunch of textures, that looks much better with the solid purple or that purple texture on it. So if you bring in a bunch of textures, you can just kind of keep going and change them on the fly. Now this unicorn one is not seamless, as you can tell, but it's kind of fun to play with as well. That's kind of cute. Now we can take the location of it and we can move it to get a look that we want. I would probably scale it down a little bit. But again, this one's not seamless, so we're not going to get any kind of decent result from it at all anyways. You're just going to have to bring in a texture that's going to fit a little closer to one-on-one with your UV. So what you would do is you would take your UVs from this and export it, and then find a texture that's going to fit into that one right over there. Okay, so with that done, this one actually, you can see, is a little bit darker in those areas, but not much. Yeah, a little bit of a highlight here. Let's go on to the skirt, and now we can play with the lights a little bit, I guess. Take their strength down. Okay, as the strength goes down, do you see I'm getting more of a shadow and more of a highlight effect? So please don't be afraid to play with the settings. It's all good. I kind of like the way that that's turning out. I'd have a different texture here, of course. Now if we go back here to the skirt, we can take this gloss and we can make it stronger, and we can change the color of it. So if you wanted to, let's say you could have a purplish gloss. So it's not quite as white, and it added a little bit of purple to it. And now let's do the extremes so that you can see what they are. So roughness all the way down. makes it super bright, super shiny up here. You have absolutely nothing here. It's all concentrated up there. We take this slowly the other way. We have absolutely no gloss on it at all. So that doesn't really work. So let's take this back down to about right around 50 usually works pretty good. That's probably why Blender keeps it as its default number. Yeah, 0.5, not 50. Sorry about that. Alright, so we will change the top here real quick because that's a bad texture. Do solid purple. For the top, we want to have a tiny bit of purple in here, I think. Just a tiny. Come on. Just the smallest hint of purple. Yeah, I like that. So now if you wanted this in different colors, you would just bring in the different colored pattern pieces or take the pattern out of it and then just change the color on the lights. Alright, so now let's go back to these. When you want to bake out the actual, 1 second. I say 1 second, you would have had no idea how long I was actually gone. When you bake out these textures, this node must be selected. If this is not selected, it's not going to work. So with that selected on the skirt, and let's go to the top, and on the top, have that selected as well. We can go to scene. We're leaving our sample really low. If I was going to use this for actually bringing it in world, I would have used a different sample, but Cycles has gotten so nice. When you see this though, because it's a low resolution image, most don't consider 1024 low res, but 2048 is good when you're baking. This looks going to look a little grainy, I'll bet you. So when you bake, you have to choose combined. Alright? So with combined select in the bake button, I'm going to go ahead and hit bake. You can see how quickly it's baking down here. Here's the bar for it. I would pause the video, but it's pretty quick. Alright, so now here is the skirt texture. And you can see that's actually not bad as far as getting some shadow in there for the like ambient occlusion. You could definitely take this and just add a little bit of darkness to it. And let's go here and see how the top turned out. I don't think it baked my top. Okay, so let's go back here. That is the top. Oh, I didn't have it selected in this window. Alright, now we got the top. This is selected. So let's go ahead and hit bake. Again, we're already at 30–40%. And where's my top? There it is. So there we go. The shoulders are bright because, of course, the light is hitting straight down on them. So you might want to fix that a little bit. We have shine here around the front. You can see that we've got the back. I'd say that looks pretty good. Alright, so then go here. You've got this, right? You can make new images and put new ones down here, but we're just going to override these. So we have the top, and we have the top selected, and we're going to choose Ambient Occlusion and Bake. I don't know why it changed. Not much in there at all, but you know, for this being so low in sample size, this new Cycles is really doing great on the graininess. There really isn't a whole lot of it at all. So in order to get a better ambient occlusion, you could probably take these lights apart, like separate them, move them further away or angle them different to get different shadows and highlights on different parts of the dress. But remember, this is really, you know, there's not a lot of curvy stuff in here, so you're not going to get a whole lot of shadows or anything going on. Let's do the skirt real fast. Skirt selected. Let's put the skirt here as well. Is this the one? It's not doing it. I don't know why that skirt one went away. Let's bake it anyway, see what happens. You would export those images before you went and baked over it. You could hit image and save as, and then when you come in here you can overwrite it because you've got a copy of it. But there you go, there you got some ambient occlusion on these as well. You could double that up to make that twice as strong inside of Photoshop or GIMP or whatever you like. Okay, so that's the basics of Cycles. I hope that you enjoyed that. I know that was a little longer than I wanted it to be, but please subscribe, share, like, and if you have any questions or anything, you can get a hold of me. You all know how, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Have a great day and do some texture baking. Bye.